Welcome back to my channel, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Today I want to talk about masculine white florals. Now, when we think of florals, we immediately think of women's perfumery, and it's probably only been in the last 20-25 years that we've had a bit of a reawakening and we're starting to accept floral components in masculine perfumery for the first time since probably the turn of the very last century. So it's a genre that I love, and in fact I've always enjoyed white florals worn by women. My wife in particular adores any white floral fragrance. She's all about the gardenia, the tuberose, you name it. And I think, why can't I have a slice of that action? It was only yesterday I was walking up through a local park here and really got that sense of the beginning of spring. I saw wild freesias growing out of the ground and plucked them and smelled them, and it just took me back to a time in New Zealand when I was a boy where they used to grow outside of my bedroom window. And I thought, why can't I wear a scent that smells like this? I'm happy to have found 3 fragrances in my collection that I want to highlight for you guys, all white florals of varying kind of intensities, and I'm going to go over them now. So we're going to start off with Isabey Sir Galahad. So Galahad is from a fragrance house which was established in the early 1900s, Isabey, Paris. And it was long before this brand was reprised that I fell in love with many of its fragrances. In fact, they used to make some of the most exquisite perfume bottles and boxes and presentations that you can even imagine. You should Google antique or vintage Isabey. And when they reprised the brand a few years ago, I was super excited. My wife's favourite fragrance from their line is gardenia, and I always yearned for something that was very similar. They answered my prayers. Sir Galahad is a masculine floral which uses gardenia in both top and middle notes and is also underpinned by jasmine. So quite a floral fragrance, and not one that I would suggest anyone shy away from as well. It is actually pretty spectacular. It's got great supporting notes with mandarin and saffron in the top notes. And underneath you've got tobacco, amber and vanilla, and I love it. It's got a wonderful texture to it as well. It's diffusive and almost powdery without being soapy. So Galahad just feels very rich. It's a scent which I love to wear in the wintertime in particular. It just becomes very, I guess it reaches far. The sillage is wonderful, and it is on par with the ladies' version gardenia. For that reason alone, I'm delighted that they decided to create a men's fragrance focusing on that white floral. And who doesn't love gardenia? It's such a spectacular scent. So anyway, Sir Galahad is number 1 in my trio. If you haven't sorted out, it's still in production. Try and find some samples. Here in Australia, you can find it on various websites and things like that. And internationally, obviously through Parfums Panouge or Isabey Paris. But yeah, highly recommend. Our next one coming up now is Dior Fahrenheit 32. Fahrenheit 32 by Dior is a fantastic floral. And in fact, my very first encounter with this, I was going to a rock concert in Denmark many years ago, and we were visited by 2 friends who were twins, each of them wearing this fragrance. And in fact, they were women as well, so I can definitely say that Fahrenheit 32 is a genderless scent, and I appreciate it on both men and women. Now, those people who are familiar with the very original Dior Fahrenheit from the 80s, when you kind of think of it, you think of that wonderful styrax and violet and petroleum type notes. Well, if you're expecting something similar, you might be a little bit disappointed. However, in its own right, Fahrenheit 32 does not disappoint at all. It is a wonderful masculine which trains its focus on orange blossom. So you've kind of got some of those, I guess a little bit of the DNA of the original Fahrenheit, but they've appended a lot of orange blossom here, vetiver, and in the base, vanilla. So suddenly Fahrenheit 32 took it from being quite a hot, warm fragrance to something brisk and cool. You almost feel as if you're standing on the edge of an Arctic cliff and that air is hitting you with this fragrance. But that orange blossom is omnipresent and it is spectacular. As far as masculine florals go, this one is very high, close to the apex for me. A wonderful scent, lovely sort of velvety texture, and one that I never tire of. In fact, I think I took this with me on a skiing trip to New Zealand 10 or so years ago, and every time I smell it now, I'm up in that alpine region. Next up, we've got the phenomenal Fleur de Mal by Jean-Paul Gaultier. So the very same year as Fahrenheit 32, Fleur de Mal was launched onto the world stage, and this one was created by Francis Kirkdejean. It's a wonderful floral that also trains its focus on orange blossom and neroli. And when it was first launched, I don't think many men were prepared for a floral of this magnitude. It is titanic. And in fact, it's a very different approach to white florals than the Fahrenheit 32. This one's wonderful. It's got a really great kind of petit grain citrus undercurrent, and it's steeped over chamomile, and it's a chamomile that's quite rich and dark. What I love about Fleur de Mal is that it really trains its focus on indoles. And if you're not sure what indoles are molecules of scent, which are basically found in white florals in profusion. So if you've ever walked past a jasmine bush at dusk, for example, when it's just starting to release that rousing perfume on the air, and it's quite overwhelming, it almost becomes like a fecal smell. Indoles are also found in feces, so it's not unusual when you're smelling those white florals in profusion to think, oh, that smells a bit like poo. However, when used in perfumery, it actually is a fantastic thing. Fleur de Mal does not disappoint. It has titanic sillage, and in fact, my wife and I chased a man through a supermarket in Denmark many, many years ago to figure out what it was he was wearing when he strolled past us, and it was Fleur de Mal. That was our very first encounter with it. Unfortunately, it has been discontinued now, so if there was a scent that I would say sort of comes within its universe, it would be one by Molinard called Molinard pour Homme number 2, I think it was. White bottle with red writing on it. It's sort of in the same stratosphere as this fragrance, so I think it's slightly more readily available than this. This one's commanding high prices on the internet. So if you're looking for something similar, Molinard pour Homme number 2, and of course it still resides in that kind of Kouros universe. When Kouros was first launched onto the world stage, it trained its focus on jasmine. So even in the early 80s, we were starting to see white florals brought forward in masculine perfumery, but perhaps not to the same level as we've seen over the last 20 to 25 years. Anyway, florals are here to stay, and I'm delighted that they've been really focused on in masculine perfumery. And again, I don't think you should shy away from anything like that. If you like a smell, then you should be wearing it. Thank you for joining me as I went over these few masculine white florals in my collection. I'd love to hear what your favorite florals are too. Your masculine white florals, if I haven't touched upon in this video, please add them to the comments below. I want to have a sniff and a read. And hit the subscribe button if you haven't already done so, or share. And I want to thank you for joining me today. I smell like indoles right now because I've been spritzing from each of these bottles. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Thanks for joining me, and I'll catch up with you next time.